Hey everyone, welcome to another video. In this video I'm gonna be ranking all of the eyeshadow palettes that I have tried in the year of 2022. I have 36 eyeshadow palettes here in front of me and I'm gonna be telling you which ones I didn't like and which ones were my ultimate favorites. So let's get into it. So this is promising to be a pretty long video, so I'm just gonna give one little disclaimer before I jump into it. I've had a little bit of a weird makeup year. I've said that in more of my roundup videos, but I have not worn a lot of eyeshadow this year. There were a few months that I didn't wear any makeup at all, so some of these palettes I have not tested out as thoroughly as I wanted to. I have pushed back this video a lot. I have pushed this back to like the last moment I could possibly film it, and I've really tried to test out these palettes more and really try to do a bunch of looks. But there's still some palettes here where I cannot like give you a full review of them. But this ranking is also just based on excitement, on anticipation, on use. It's based on a lot of different things and it could change. It could easily change depending on the week, on my mood. So don't take it too seriously. This one, it is just for fun. It's just telling you how I feel about these palettes right now. Okay, let's start with the last one, and I don't think this is gonna be much of a shock for some of you. So in last place I put the Make Beauty Fun eyeshadow palette by Essence. I actually only used this twice and then I was so sick of it that I just decluttered it right away. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna use this anymore. I'm not gonna try this anymore. This is so bad. I don't want to deal with this anymore. All of this is just so light. You can't get any like real difference with your eye looks. You cannot get anything like really stands out. It all just looks so light, like a wash of color. All of the shimmers look the same. All of the looks kind of look samey. The only shades that could kind of add some depth are these green and like this pink, but that's kind of where it ends. There's just nothing here for me. It's all just so light. It is not the type of eyeshadow, it's not the type of palette that I like, and it's just a little bit like dusty, crumbly. It's not even worth it using this as a companion palette because the quality in here just isn't good. I did not like this palette. I love the packaging, and Essence has come out with some eyeshadows. One eyeshadow palette that I do like this year. Okay, that's not a lot, but yeah, this is the worst one of the ones I've tried by Essence. Then another Essence eyeshadow palette is in the next spot, and this is the Essence Disney Princess Rapunzel palette. This is such a dusty palette. I cannot get any like difference in the looks here. Everything is just so like muddy, blends into each other. You don't see the different shades on the eye. The shimmers are just very lackluster, very powdery. This whole thing is just very powdery, and there's no variation you can get with this palette, and it all just looks so muddy and weird on the eyes. I didn't like this one at all. This is not a great quality. Then in the next spot we have the Welcome to Miami eyeshadow palette by Essence. Once again, very mediocre eyeshadow. These shades they do a little bit more than the eyeshadow palettes that I showed you before. There is a little bit more difference. I can get a somewhat visible eye look with this. I can get some differences with it, but I feel like the shimmers are just very lackluster. The mattes are just very lightly pigmented. I didn't like this whole vibe at all. I didn't like the looks that I did with it. It all just looked very so-so, very just okay, and that's not what I'm going for. So this is also a pretty bad eyeshadow palette by Essence. I would not recommend picking this one up. Then next up, another disappointment, but finally we have another brand. Another very disappointing eyeshadow palette was the Pro Slim eyeshadow palette Hint of Mint by Catrice. I was not a fan of this. The shimmers in here are so lackluster, so dry. I couldn't get them to really show up on the eye. All of the mattes basically blend into each other, are very samey. There are just a bunch of mid-tone browns and then two deeper browns, and they all look basically the same on the eye. Nothing special there. The greens, they don't really add anything because they are very mediocre, lackluster once again. So when you look at this palette, you might be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. There's a pop of mint, but it doesn't really do anything when you really try to work with it. I have not used this palette It's like since the start of the year when I tried it, I was so disappointed and I was like, okay, that's gotta leave my collection. I was not into this. I would not recommend this. other eyeshadow palettes, like one other eyeshadow palette of this range I do like. So I don't think that all the eyeshadow palettes from this range are gonna be bad, but at least this one I would steer clear of. It's not good. Then next up we have the Catrice Caviar Gouge eyeshadow palette. This is from a limited edition collection, and you know, it is not so much the quality, it's more the color story. It's just very light. I don't use a beige shade like this, and these two shimmers are basically the same, and then you have this that kind of does something. So it's just very subtle, very light. It doesn't do a lot. This is not my makeup style. I do like neutral looks. I do like something subtle from time to time, but this just doesn't do a whole lot, and it's not like these shimmers are so amazing that it makes this whole thing worth it. I just felt like they could have done a little bit better with this if this shade, the light beige, would have been a deeper shade to kind of deepen up the look. Then I think it would have been much higher, but this is just so light, so beige, so soft that I just had to put it pretty low, because this is not really an exciting type of eyeshadow palette for me, and the other things from this collection I liked way better than this thing. Then one that I'm pretty sad about that I didn't like, and I've already talked about this one in some videos, the Nomad Cosmetics Paradise Islands eyeshadow palette. I put pretty low because I don't like this eyeshadow formula, and I've seen people raving and raving and raving about Nomad Cosmetics, and I wish I loved it. I wish I liked this as much as they do, because I love the color story, I love the packaging. It's such a cute palette, but I just didn't like the quality. I felt like the mattes were blotchy, they were too thin, they didn't blend well, and every time I did a look with them it just looked weird. I just felt like it didn't look good, and I couldn't get them to blend the way I can usually blend these types of shades. They just didn't really stick the way I wanted to, and then most of the shimmers are very lackluster, very similar in my eyes to the Essence shimmers. Just nothing really there, no real shine and no real pigment. They were just very satiny, but not in a way that it could really add something to a look. There are two shimmers, Fish and Shark, that I kind of like, but that's where it ends with this palette. So I'm giving them points for the packaging and for the vibe, which is really cool, but this is no longer in my collection. I really didn't like it, and I'm sure that the people that love this truly love it, but it's not working out for me, and I'm not sure how that came to be. Why don't I like it? I guess we all have different makeup preferences. Then next up we have the Pat McGrath Labs and Bridgerton eyeshadow palette. This actually isn't such a bad palette, but I just was a little bit disappointed, and especially because it's more expensive and people rave and rave and rave about Pat McGrath. This was my first Pat McGrath palette that I tried, and the only one that I tried this year. People were raving about it, but when I got it I felt like the only shade that kind of made this worth it was this sparkly blue, which is a beautiful shade, but the rest of this palette is just very like okay, especially for the price. I feel like they didn't really put a lot of effort in here. Like these two shades, they are Beaujolais shades, like a Beaujolais formula. They look very similar on the eye, and then the rest is just a pretty basic nude shades that I have in other palettes, in formulas that I think are more interesting, are more special. I love Bridgerton. I love the vibe. I love the whole idea of this collection, but I feel like the way they actually executed it wasn't my favorite. I wasn't amazing. I was kind of thinking, should I declutter it? Should I not? It is still in my collection, but I was pretty close to actually decluttering it. It's just a pretty okay palette, and I was just expecting a lot more from this brand. Next up we have the Essence Everlasting Blooms eyeshadow palette, and I actually decluttered this. This is no longer in my collection. I think this is higher up because I really loved the pink mattes in this palette and the pink shimmers. That all worked beautifully. I love the looks that I did with it. It was so vibrant, it was so bright, it was so fun, like spring summery, but I don't get the pressed glitter in here. I haven't touched that. I don't really use pressed glitters because nowadays the shimmers and eyeshadow palettes, and especially in a bunch of indie palettes, are so amazing, so beautiful, that I don't really see the point of risking it. And I just felt like these two purple shimmers were just a little bit lackluster. So I could get a look out of this that I was really into, and that's why I ranked it higher, because that look was just very nice, but it wasn't enough to like keep this palette, and it wasn't enough and it wasn't enough to rank this higher. If there are so many dots or kind of unusable shades in a palette, I cannot like rank it higher than towards the bottom. Then we have the Catrice Pocahontas eyeshadow palette from the Disney Princess collection. It's a pretty long time ago that they actually released this, so I almost didn't put these in, but they are part of the palettes that I tried this year. So I actually think this is a pretty good palette. We have a pretty nice range of shades. The mattes work well. They're a bit powdery, but they work well. They do build and you can get quite an impactful look. There are some different shimmery textures in here, different textures for the shimmers. We have some topper shades, we have some sparkly shades, we have some satin shades. I quite like this palette actually. I don't have a lot of complaints about it. I just don't think it's like super special, and we have some redundant shades. It sometimes feels a little bit samey. I feel like it's pretty good. It's pretty okay. I quite like it, but it never became a true favorite and never really got me inspired and excited. So that's why it's a little bit lower in the ranking. Then we have the Martine Cosmetics Martine's Diner eyeshadow palette, and I was pretty excited when I first saw this because last year I ranked the like space planet little eyeshadow palettes, the trio that you could buy last year in the fall. I ranked that pretty high, so I was like, okay, I like this eyeshadow formula. I'm really curious to try one of the bigger palettes, and there are a bunch of shades in here that I do like, but there are also a bunch of shades in here that I think are lackluster and don't really work. So I do like the mattes, like a bunch of the mattes, not this light yellow, that's not my favorite, but I do like these deeper kind of berry shades. I do like the mints, like the browns, but a lot of the shimmers are like very satiny, but not in a way that I like. I like a satin if it does have a shine and like a thickness to it, but it just felt a little bit thin. Not my favorite. And then some of the mattes just didn't perform as well. So all in all, I did some looks with it that I really liked. The look that I did in my first impression with this one is one of my favorite looks of the year, of the past year, but still I couldn't rank it higher because I just was hoping for something more. Like the shimmers, I love shimmers. I just love good shimmers, and good shimmers can really bump up a palette for me. Like it can bump it up to a favorite. I just love a good shimmer. Like if the mattes are okay, but the shimmers are amazing, I can keep using and using a palette. But here the mattes were really nice. Like some of the mattes were really nice, but then I didn't really have the shimmers, the really special beautiful shimmers to pair it with, and so I don't really reach for this palette anymore. It was a little bit of a disappointment. I feel like it could have been better. Then we have the Essence Jurassic World eyeshadow palette. When I first tried it, I really liked it, and there's a certain look that I do with this that I really like, where I really put this dark kind of army green, like grayish green in the outer corner. I love that look. I love this matte, and because of that, I quite like this palette and I ranked it a bit higher. But I feel like I don't have a lot of options here. I don't feel like I have a lot of variety here, because I feel like this matte kind of carries the palette. The rest is nice. It is pretty okay. It's a pretty good quality eyeshadow palette, but it is not amazing. So when I do a look, before I put on the green, I'm like, okay, this is okay, pretty okay, and then I put on the green and it kind of transforms and I love it. But yeah, because of that, I don't feel like this whole palette is like the most amazing palette ever. But the look that I do with it, I've talked about this before. The look that I do with it, with that green in the crease, I'm really into. That's why this is still in my collection. I don't know if it's gonna stay forever, but the green is really nice. So yeah, it's a pretty good palette. It's not my absolute favorite, like overall, like all of the shades. Like the shimmers are pretty nice and mattes work well. The green is a really good matte. I think if I could have done more different looks with this that I really loved, it would have been much higher. Now it's a little bit towards the bottom. Then we have a palette that I expected to love, the Smoke and Mirrors palette by GlossGods. I thought this was gonna be amazing. In the end, I like all the shades except the two grays at the bottom, and those grays, they are really the grays that could make this a beautiful smoky palette, because it's a smoky palette. We need deep grays, but they don't work. I feel like they're blotchy, they don't blend well, they don't build, they just go everywhere. I cannot get these to work. I've tried different techniques. I tried so many different like brushes, ways of applying. I could not get this to work, and there are other grays later on in this ranking that I did like, that it did get to work, but this just didn't work out. And usually when 2 shades in a palette don't work, I'm pretty like okay about it. I can just ignore those and use all the different shades. But when you take these away, there's not much left of the smoky palette. The reason I still rank this pretty high, and the reason I think I'm still gonna use it quite a bit, is because I really love the shimmers, and I feel like if I kind of combine it with different palettes, with all the mattes, I can still come to really like these. But I just have to deduct some points for those gray mattes. I just wish they worked. I wish they were good. Then I would have loved this palette. I could have loved you, but no, it didn't work out for us. I am still keeping it in my collection. I'm still like testing it out a bit. I do want to try the other shades. I just really love their shimmer formula, but yeah, it was a bit of a bummer. Now we're actually getting into the eyeshadow palettes that I think were good. Like, no real complaints, but not yet the favorites. So next up we have the My Mini Eyeshadow Palette by Kiko Milano. I think this is a cute palette. The packaging is nothing special. It feels kind of cheapy, but we have some nice sparkly shades in here. This shade is kind of like a peach to champagne sparkly duochrome. This shade is kind of like a foresty green sparkly shade. These mattes, they work quite well. This shade, the gray shade, I don't really get in this palette. It doesn't really work out for me, but all in all, it's a pretty good quality palette with some nice textures and quite an interesting color story. I did some cute looks with it. I was thinking about maybe decoloring it, but I think I quite like it in the end. It's quite a good palette, pretty good. Then we have the Kiko Milano Sweet Affairs eyeshadow palette. This eyeshadow palette is pretty like nude, so it's not like the most inspiring thing ever, and I feel like none of these formulas really stand out, but it is a decent palette. It's a good palette, and every time I use it, I'm like, wow, that actually looks good. That actually looks flattering. I have liked all the looks that I did with it. It is just that these baked shimmer shades are not as good as some shimmers I've tried from Kiko, and this matte, for example, these mattes are pretty light, so it's not my absolute favorite, but I like the looks. It's decent. It just doesn't let me down, so I still think that it deserves a place in the good category. Okay, next up we have the Catrice eyeshadow palette from the Tropic Exotic collection, and I was pretty impressed with this. The shimmers in here are quite nice, except one of the blues. I forgot which one. I think this blue wasn't pigmented, wasn't shiny. I like these two mattes. They're really nice. I don't care about the beige. I never use a beige, light beige eyeshadow. It's not what I do. This is really set and it doesn't do a lot. You can only really like blend out the edges of one of the other dark shades. So in the end, it's not a perfect palette. We have some dots in here, but the shimmers that do work are really nice, and the looks that I did with the two mattes that I do like are really good. So I have really enjoyed using this palette. I think it's a cute palette. I quite like the packaging. I feel like they could have made the font something different. I think it would have been nicer that way, but it's not a perfect palette, but I just have to put it a bit higher because there's some really nice shades in here that I do really enjoy. Then next up we have the Nabla Read My Mind eyeshadow palette. I think Nabla kind of lost its touch for me. The past eyeshadow palettes, like the past few eyeshadow palette releases that I tried from them, I wasn't too fond of. I wasn't too big a fan of. I think there are quite some nice matte shades in this palette. I don't like the two greens, which is interesting because that's kind of like the pop in the palette. I don't like them. There are two shimmers in here that I think are really similar. These two, they are basically the same. Didn't have to be in the palette. This shade is kind of like luster. It's supposed to be like a shimmery, sparkly topper shade. It doesn't really work. And these two are kind of okay. This shade is really like what the whole palette is about. It's kind of like a multi-chrome bronze gold pink. That is really beautiful. I think you can do some really beautiful looks with this palette. And in a way, it is quite a nice palette. but there are some dots in it and some choices that I don't really like. I don't really like the layout. I don't really like the theme. I just would have hoped for everything to work well, and I just would have hoped for there to be a little bit more variety in here. Yeah, it's just not my favorite. It's just not on the same level as other older eyeshadow palettes I've tried by Nabla. I'm just a little bit sad about this one, and I haven't really enjoyed it and used this as much as other Nabla eyeshadow palette. I just didn't. I have to be honest. I feel like this is pretty good, but it's just not a new fave. Then next up we have the Kiko Blossoming Beauty eyeshadow palette in 01 Flight of the Butterfly, and I quite like the combination of shades in here. I quite like this eyeshadow palette. I quite like the quality. The reason that it is lower, it could have been a favorite, but the reason that it is lower is this eyeshadow, it gets heartburn, and I'm kind of like sad about it. I can still get it on my eye, I can still get it on my finger, but it doesn't work as well as it did at the beginning. But I love this idea of this kind of like purpley cool tone mauves with this warmer bronzy shade. Once again, this didn't need to be in there for me. This is a throwaway shade, but I actually really like this combination. I really like the packaging, I like the price, I like Kiko, but that one shade is kind of ruining it for me. Then we have the Whatsup Beauty Geodes palette, and I think this is a pretty good palette. There are just a few things here that I don't like as much, and that's why it's a little bit lower. I think the mattes are just a little bit soft and not as interesting as the shimmers, and then the shimmers, they work the best with the glitter glue, but I don't always feel like using a glitter glue. It's not something that I do a lot, so because of that I don't really reach a lot for this palette, and because of that it's not really a favorite. I feel like the color story could be a little bit more interesting, especially with these beautiful, very nice looking shimmers. Then the mattes, they don't really live up to the expectation that they give me, so I feel like it's not like a complete match between me and this palette. Even though I really like the packaging, there's something really cute about this color story, but I just feel like if there was more of a match between these shimmers and mattes, and the shimmers would just work on their own without a glitter glue, it could have been higher. It would have been more of a favorite, I think. Then we have the Nabla Secret eyeshadow palette. I have been eyeing this eyeshadow palette for a long time, and this was the year that I was like, okay, let's try it finally. And I think this is a pretty cute color story. I really like the blues in here. I really like the pinks in here. I like this bottom row of like mustardy neutrals. It's a type of nudish color that I have come to appreciate, that I have come to enjoy. The reason that it's a little bit lower is because some of these shimmers are just a little bit too satiny and uninteresting for me, like this whole top row. These shimmers, these satins, they are just okay, and I have tried satins from Nabla that I have enjoyed much more. So yeah, it's not the perfect palette, but I do like the color story. I would recommend it if you don't mind having a few satins in your eyeshadow palette. There are some shimmers here like that are more sparkly, like sparkly topper shade that you can combine them with. So I usually, when I use this palette, use those shimmers on top and it all works out fine. Yeah, I do like this palette. It's not my ultimate favorite. It did not compete with my really like absolute favorite eyeshadow palettes from Nabla, so that's why I put it a little bit lower than I would have put the other Nabla eyeshadow palettes. Then next up I put the Essence Don't Worry Be eyeshadow palette, and I just think that this is a really cute eyeshadow palette. I really like the shades in here. The shimmers are nice quality, the mattes are nice quality. The reason that it's a little bit lower is that it doesn't give you a lot of options, but of course, it's just a 6-pan. It's just a 6-pan. It's not supposed to give you a bunch of options, but I keep doing the same look. It is a nice look though, and it's very nice to travel with, and I've used it a bunch. Like, I've taken it with me to travel and used it. So it's a nice palette. It's just not like groundbreaking. It's not like the shimmers are super sparkly, and I've never seen this before, but it is good. It is a good palette. I would recommend it if you're looking for these types of shades for like a small price. Next up we have the same situation actually, but then with warm tones. So this is the Colourpop Pressed Powder palette in Citrus Fizz. So this is one of the quads. This is the first and probably only quad that I'm gonna try from them. This is great quality. The shimmers are sparkly, the mattes are pigmented, but I do one look with this and one look only, and it doesn't give me that many options. These little palettes, they can't help it. They can't help that they are supposed to do that, but because of that I cannot rank them like really high. Next up we have the palette by Nimya. I tried this recently and I've done my best to do some more looks. My conclusions so far, I'm not officially reviewing this yet, but my conclusions so far are that I think the mattes are a little bit dry, a little bit powdery. I feel like they could build more and they would look better on the eye if they were a little bit less powdery. There's just a dryness to them that I don't really love. Then the shimmers, I really like the traditional shimmers that are just shiny in here. The sparkles, like the sparkly topper shades, they're just a little bit messy. They fly around your face, even with the glitter glue, they fly around. So I feel like this is a pretty good palette overall, but there are some faults here, there are some reasons here, there are some things going on here that I wish could be better, and if they were better I could have ranked it higher, but now I don't think it's gonna be like an ultimate favorite. I did some pretty looks with it, but if I compare them with other looks that I've done with my absolute favorite palettes, I just feel like it doesn't really live up to those. Yeah, it's a pretty good palette. The complaints are in a way kind of minor, but yeah, I don't get super excited about it right now, and it doesn't really make me go like, oh, I can't wait for the next palette. And my favorites always do that to me, so yeah. It's pretty nice. It's a good first palette, but I feel like there's still a way to go. There's still some growing to do with this eyeshadow formula. It's not my absolute favorite. Next up, we have the Colourpop Clay It Cool palette. And I like this packaging. I like the colors. It's good quality. It's amazing quality. It's really good quality. But it's just a very typical type of look that you get with this. It always looks pretty much the same, but like lighter or deeper. It is a very monotone palette in a way, which it is what it is. It's nice, but because of that I don't get super excited to use it. I think it's also a little bit more warm toned, a little bit more orangey in undertone than I was expecting, and like an orangey undertone is not my absolute favorite. For me to love a palette with all kind of samey shades, it would have been like my perfect kind of undertone, and these pull a little bit warmer on my eyes than I would absolutely love. So there's nothing really wrong with this palette. It's just not a perfect match once again between me and this palette. It's just not the type of palette that gets me most exciting. I was expecting to really love these types of shades, but I like my neutrals just a little bit more, with a little bit more variation, a little bit more on the cool tone side, maybe a little bit more rosy. This wasn't as rosy as I was expecting it to be. Next up, I put the Lunar Beauty Moonspell 2 eyeshadow palette. That is not new, but I tried it for the first time this year, but I just always put everything in this video. So this is the Moonspell 2. I actually like this quality more than I was expecting. I really like the quality. I like all the looks that I've done with it. The mattes are beautiful, bright, buildable. The shimmers are really stunning. Some of them are more traditional shimmers, some of them are more sparkly. I really like the sparkly shades. The reason why I put this a little lower is because it's really bright, and I'm usually not really into the brights. Like right now, I'm not really into the brights, but in the end, I do really like this color story in a way, and I like all the looks with it, but when I open it up, it's not inspiring me right away. It's just a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but there's nothing really wrong with it, and I've done a lot of pretty cute looks. It is nice. It's a nice palette. Next up, I put the Lunar Beauty Eternal Eclipse palette, and I actually really like this palette. I like the neutral shades. I like the neutral looks that I've done with it. We have some more satiny shades. We have some more sparkly shades. The reason that this is a little bit lower is because this bottom row, even though I think the quality is really good, I don't really reach for it. It's a little bit too dark and gray for me. I know that this is what makes the palette special, but I really like these top two rows. This is where it's at for me. And also I just like this shimmer formula in other palettes a little bit better than this. I feel like when this came out, this was an amazing shimmer formula, and some of these shimmers I still think are amazing, are really nice, but I'm just a little bit done with satins right now. Like some satins I like, but there's a specific type of satin that I like right now. I totally get the appeal of satins, but at this point, not really into it. Next up, I put the Glaminatrix Silent Night eyeshadow palette. I got this a little bit late last year. I didn't try this at Christmas. I tried it later. I think this is a good palette. The shimmers are really nice. A lot of the mattes are really nice. I just think this green doesn't really blend and build as well and isn't as pigmented as these other mattes. This is actually the reason that it's a little bit lower. The green just isn't amazing and the color story is a little bit challenging. I knew that going into it, but I just feel like it's a bit hard to come up with looks that I really love. But the quality is really nice, except for the green. But yeah, I think it's a cute palette. I think it's a nice take on Christmas eyeshadow palettes. I really like the packaging. It is good. It's a good palette. I like it. Next up, I put the palette that I'm wearing today. This is the Glaminatrix Cosmetics Nocturnal eyeshadow palette. I think this is a very interesting color story. Very grungy. I really like the mattes that I've tried so far. I've not tried all the shades yet. This is one of the palettes that I don't feel like ready to review it. But I've really tried my best to use it more, and so far I really like it. I really like the look that I did today. I really went into these shades over here, added a little bit of green, added a little bit of this shade. I think the shimmers are really nice, like duochromy, sparkly. The mattes I think are blendable, buildable, and we have a really nice combination of shades. It really gets me outside of my comfort zone, but not too much. I can still see how this will all work together. I think the packaging is a little bit strange, like this edge, it's just like, how would you call it, like foamy? Feels foamy. I feel like it would have been nicest if this had something, another layer on top of it. It feels kind of unfinished, but like the front I really like. This is just a little bit strange, according to me. Just according to me. I'm sure there are reasons why this is the way it is, but I really like this palette so far. I think it's a good palette. It's inspiring. The quality is good. I mean, the shimmers, the sparkles, really nice. So yeah, could have been higher possibly if I'd used it more, but there's only so much time I have to do my makeup. Only so many days. Next up, I put the Lunar Beauty 12 Days of Lunar. If you haven't opened this, I am sure you have, because this is gonna go up probably at Christmas. I am wearing my whole Christmas outfit, my Christmassy vibes. I took them with me to film this video, so I'm gonna open it. If you don't want to see it, just skip ahead like a minute. So I really like the whole vibe and the packaging of this, and the color story inside I think is really beautiful. Actually, I've really come to like it. I've really gotten into it. It's a little bit more fall-esque than the front, but I can live with it. It's okay. Yeah, the looks that I did with this are really nice. The shimmer formula in here is next level. That's also why I put this higher than the other Lunar Beauty palettes that are like the older quality. I just really love this shimmer formula. I just really like this palette. I feel like there are quite some neutral-ish shimmers in this. There could have been a little bit more variation with that, but all in all, I think this is an amazing palette. Loved all the mattes, like they were so creamy, so buildable, so pigmented, lovely shades. I love the shimmers. Like this shimmer formula is one of my favorite shimmer formulas in my collection right now. And I really hope that Manny keeps doing this formula, because I will buy palettes just for this formula alone. It will be enough reason for me to buy palettes. So yeah, really into this. I think it's a cute palette. I still have to use it a little bit more. I can't say it's like an ultimate favorite. For that, I have to use it more. I got it in like quite a short while ago, and I still had so many palettes to try out for this video, but I like it, I like it. Okay, next up we have the Dragonfruit palette from Clionadh Cosmetics and Emily Violet Marie. I just love this whole vibe. I just love this whole idea. I love the packaging of this. I've never tried a Dragonfruit in my life. I have not, and I would love to, but I never see these anywhere. Like, what does this taste like? I have no idea. But I think the inside is so like summery. I love this kind of acrylic packaging. The quality in here is amazing. The shimmers in here are amazing. The satins in here are amazing. I've done so many cute looks with this. It's a very nice companion palette as well. The reason that I put this a little bit lower is because even though I try to use this as a standalone palette, for me it's not like the perfect standalone palette. I would love to kind of combine it with other things. On its own, it just doesn't work as well for me as some of the other palettes that I have put a little bit higher than this one. I do love it. It does get me really excited. It gets me really excited about makeup. Like some of the shimmers in here are like stunning, amazing. Like most of the shimmers, actually everything in here, like there's no problem with this quality. It is just an all shimmer palette, and that doesn't always get me as inspired because you kind of have to think outside of the palette what you want to combine it with. But I think this is super cute, really well done. Then at this spot I put the two GlossGods neutral remixed eyeshadow palettes that I got, I think at this point 2 months ago. I have the New Neutrals palette, which is actually my favorite of the two. I really love these kind of murky green vibes that it has while being neutral. It's like really neutral undertones in neutrals. And I just love how some of these shift to green, and just this cute stuff and Center Stage have a little bit of a green vibe to them, but very subtle, so still neutral. I love all the looks that I did with it. I think this is a beautiful, stunning eyeshadow palette. I did a pretty simple look using soft glamour and I think cute stuff recently, and I was really into it. This is so good. I think the mattes work well, blend well, build well. I think the shimmers are amazing. There's a multi-chrome in here that is gorgeous. So good. This is, I think, just a little bit lower, even though I think the color story is amazing, beautiful, inspiring. I just think we have seen this a bit more than the other one. This one has one shade that I think can be slightly finicky. Not too bad, nothing that really make me not like this palette, but I just have to be a little bit careful when I use this. But it is a dark purple, it happens. This has so many beautiful shimmers, very cute kind of rosy and purpley shades in here. I love the shade Oh the Stories. It is so bright. It's so bright and purple. This is an amazing palette. I really like it. This has really set my sights on GlossGods. That is why I purchased the Smoke and Mirrors, but it was just not the same, like at the same level as these ones according to me. Kind of sad about it, kinda, but these are amazing. I really like them. They are on the way to become some of my favorite palettes in my collection. Really into those. Alright, we are getting into the top 5, and I have switched these around so many times in my head and just laying it out on a table these past weeks. It has been hard because some of the palettes that have made it into this top 5 I have only gotten in recently, and I was just a bit unsure if I should put them so high. But because this is really about my mood, about my feelings, about how excited I am, I have decided to just do it as I feel it. So yeah, some of these palettes I have not used a bunch just yet. One that I have had for a little bit longer and I've used a bit more is in the 5th spot, the Catrice Fall in Colors eyeshadow palette. I've talked about this a lot. I am so excited about this palette. I love the color story. I love the quality in here. The mattes are beautiful, pigmented, blendable, creamy. I really like them. I really like these deepening up shades here. They really stole my heart. The thing that has really bumped this palette towards the top is the sparkly shades in here. We have some satin shades. This is the type of satin shade that I do like. The quality of these satins I'm into. But we also have some sparkly shades. We have this one, and this one. Like a rosy tone, a cool tone, and more of a champagne-y bronze almost. A little bit lighter. These will spice up and pop any look. They are so sparkly, they are so beautiful, they are so shiny. So yeah, I really like this palette. The whole vibe of this is also very luxurious. I love the packaging. I love the price as well. It's very affordable. I think Catrice did a great job. And if all their palettes were like this, I would like literally buy them all because this is amazing quality. They did a great job, and I just really want to compliment them on what they did with this palette. I've been really into it. I love this color story, just the colors, everything. I love everything about this palette. This truly has been one of my favorites of the past few months. Then in spot 4, when I ranked these palettes first a few weeks ago and I wasn't sure, should I already film this video, should I take some time to test more, I actually put this a little bit lower because I had only used it once, but I've really did my best. I've really focused on this palette, and I've just really grabbed for this palette just because I wanted to as well. It wasn't like forced. I really wanted to use this palette. So by now I've used it a bunch more and I feel like it deserves this spot. Even though I have not used all the shades yet, I just think this is such an amazing color story. It's the Nearly Natural palette by Glaminatrix. I think the packaging is really nice. I think the background of this is really nice. And this is the type of neutral palette that I really love. I love different undertones. I love deep, I love light, I love sparkly shimmers, some more like traditional shimmers, and just this combination of textures and shades. It is a neutral palette, but we have mauves, we have greens, we have yellows, we have warmer shades, we have deeper shades. It's just very like green pink, but so toned down that it will look very natural. And I've loved all of the looks that I did with it. This naked eye shade, this stripped back shade, this nothing to see shade. You can do such a beautiful cool toned look with this. I have loved every look that I did with it so far, and it's just so inspiring to me. These are the shimmers that I like the most from Glaminatrix as well, because they feel a little bit more lightweight. Even though they're really sparkly, they just feel very like not too thick on the eyes. They don't look too thick, they don't feel too thick. It is just very natural in a very interesting, sparkly, exciting, with beautiful undertones way. I would highly recommend it. This is an amazing palette. They did a great job. Alright, the top three. In third place we have the Hella palette by Odin's Eye and Angelica NYX. This front, this bright green, I think is so cute. I love it. And then the inside, it is a very green and pink type of color story. We have deep shades, we have lighter shades. This is my favorite type of kind of pastel-y palette, but with some like pops, with some interesting twists, with some ways to deepen it up. I have found out because of this palette, and that's also why I'm ranking it really high, also because of the quality, but I found out because of this palette that I love warm greens on the eyes. I always thought that they wouldn't look good on me because I'm a light summer, I am a cool toned girl, like cool undertones, cool to neutral. So I thought limes, that's not gonna work, but I've really loved the way I looked, the way this matched with my skin tone and my eyes. So that's a personal thing, that's for me personally, but I have loved these warm greens. This bottom row, also nice, also beautiful, but these warm greens for me are where it's at. I've done so many pretty looks with it. We have some really nice sparkly shades in here. We have a multi-chrome down here. The whole vibe of this palette I just really love, and I just think that Angelica did a great job with this color story, and Odin's Eye just always has the best quality. Yeah, I just love it when palettes inspire me, and I just love it when they kind of like push me outside of my comfort zone and I just try it, and all of a sudden I find out that I love it and that it just does something a little bit different, a little bit interesting. Yeah, I feel like this is really an addition to my collection, really something that I didn't have before, and I think they did a great job on it. So yeah, that's why I'm ranking it at third place. So I feel like second and first place, they could have been interchanged because they are both high up because of different reasons. So I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about what should be my first and what should be my second. Tomorrow I might have different feelings, but I'm just gonna stick with what it looks like right now. In second place, I put the Nude Prism eyeshadow palette by Lunar Beauty. I love the packaging of this. I think the packaging is amazing. And then the inside is a gorgeous neutral color story. We have some warmer tones, cooler tones. You can go berry, you can go deep, you can go light. We have a range of shades and options. It's amazing. I love the way these mattes blend. I love how they build. I love this shimmer formula. This is the first time we had this very mirror-like, shiny, gorgeous formula in the shimmers, and I really hope that we will see more of those. This is amazing. I've done so many looks with this. I've used this so much. This has gotten me so excited about makeup. This is my most used eyeshadow palette of this past year, and this is what really got me into Lunar Beauty. This is amazing. This is beautiful. Stunning, absolutely stunning. And the reason why I kind of wanted to put it first is because I've had it for a long time this year, and I've actually used it a lot. So in a way it is my number one. In a way it is my favorite eyeshadow palette of the year, but in spot number 1, I just had to put the Owner's Eye Christmas Eve palette. And the reason why I put it here is because it is just so inspiring. The quality in this is stunning. It's amazing. I really took my time to do a lot of looks with this the past month, and all of the looks just looked so beautiful. I love the shimmers in here, love the matte, love all of these shades together. The packaging is just stunning. It is gorgeous. I love it, and I love cool tones with yellows. The yellows in here are just some of my absolute faves. This snow light shade, so beautiful. So I have really done my best to use it more and more and more, so I could confidently put this in first place. I think I've done like 5 or 6 looks by now, and I have been so into this. This is my perfect type of eyeshadow palette because I think it is kind of like a mix between neutral and color. It's like color, but it's also wearable, and it's inspiring, but it's also making sense, all of these shades together. And I just think Owner's Eye did a great job on this. Kind of sad that I didn't get the other palette, but I'm on a low buy, so I couldn't. If I weren't on a low buy, I would have gotten the other one as well, and I'm sure it would have ended up pretty high, but this was just my perfect palette, so that's why I got this one. That's why I put it in first place, because it is just so inspiring, and I did looks with this that I have never done before in my life, that were just things that I couldn't have done without this palette. That's just something that really makes me excited about an eyeshadow palette. Whew. Okay, this is gonna be everything for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe. And let me know what your favorite eyeshadow palette of the year was. And then I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!